Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So I'm breaking down the Drydene 400 at Dover International Speedway, aka the Monster Mile, on Sunday, May 16th at around 2 p.m. Eastern. And I'm looking forward to this weekend's race. I realize I say that each and every single week because I just like watching NASCAR. But Dover's a pretty solid track for the most part. It's kind of like a big Bristol. If you look at it hard enough, you can kind of see some comparisons to that. But should be an overall pretty solid race. I do like these shorter tracks, and with this only being a mile, we will be using the short track aero package, which typically produces some pretty solid racing, so I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure you guys are as well. And if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like. My NASCAR community does a fantastic job interacting with my content, leaving likes, leaving comments, and all that fun stuff, so I really do appreciate it. And if you haven't already, if you're just brand new to the channel, around 50% of the people that watch these videos have not yet subscribed, so if you just want a free way to show me some support for all the work I do every single week, making these videos and all the extra content that I do post, just hitting that subscribe button can go a long way, so I really do appreciate that. And if you guys want to follow me over on social media, I'm at Pennell16 on Twitter and cpenn16 over on IG. Don't really post much fantasy stuff on my Instagram, but it's more of a personal account, so if you guys want to see what I'm up to every single day, working out, eating, video games, traveling, just went to Florida, so I had some fun pictures to post there. You can shoot me a follow over on there. I'm also probably going to be easier to answer DMs over there because I do have less followers over on Instagram, so that's where to find me on the social medias. And if you do want to join the community and support the channel over on Patreon, link is down below for that. You get the projections, optimizer, my own personal optimizer, ownership projections, which have been pretty solid this year, rankings, cheat sheets, data sheets. I got about 30 tabs on the spreadsheet, which has all the information you'd want each and every single week, past slate analysis, green flag speed cheat sheets, my own personal driver exposure, so you know exactly where I'm putting my money. I cannot be more transparent than that. I don't know anybody else that does that, so I do have that listed on there. I do give updates throughout the day if I do change that and the reasons why I do so. Power rankings, which is just algorithm based. I do have my own personal rankings, projections, which have been pretty solid this year. We've had multiple people take down tournaments, and you can join the Discord community as well, which is kind of an extension of the live streams that I have every single week. Lots of jokes in there, but there's some serious stuff in there if you do want some questions answered. But just a good place to hang out throughout the week, and it's always crazy on race days. So if you want to join the community, link is down below. I do appreciate all the support over there, but I think that's kind of it for the shameless plug. So without further ado, let's get into the preview of this week's race. And as per usual, I do got to mention a few things before we get into the actual preview of this race. Number one, the live stream this weekend. We typically have been having races around 3 o'clock, so I've been pushing the live streams around 2. Since the race is at 2 this week, I think green flag's going to be around 2:10, 2:15. I'm thinking the live stream should be around 12 p.m. It might be around 12:15, 12:30, but I will keep you guys posted. But plan on the live stream being around 12 p.m. Eastern on Sunday on this channel that you're watching right now, nowhere else. And then the DraftKings contest that I host each and every single week, you can join that by commenting your DK username down below. You can say something nice with it, whatever you guys want to say. You can say something mean as well. Might hurt my feelings a little bit, but I will send you that invite maybe just after the people that say nice things. But just comment your DK username down below. It's just a fun way for me to interact with you guys. About 100 people will join, and the people that finish on the podium in the top 3 will win a decent chunk of change. You can get a free shout out on the channel as well. So if you ever want a shout out, this is one way to do it on this channel. And I forgot to post the winners on the screen last week, so I feel absolutely awful about it. I still said your names, but I did forget to do that, so I feel terrible. Hopefully that does not happen again. I'll try to put it on the screen really quick at the end of this just so you can get your shout out from last week. But looking at last week's winners, I'll throw them on the screen right about now. Step Your Game Up _651 took home the gold with 338.45 points. Then coming in with the silver, we had Ruben 1974. Then Rex 23 coming in third. Then the people right in the bubble, we had C. Davis, bunch of numbers. Deuteronomy, I think it's how you say that name, but I know it's a Dude. You're in my Discord, do appreciate you, and he's also my moderator in the live streams as well. Jesus Saves 2014 in 6th, Last Cowboy in 7th, G Black 1 in 8th, Contrellians in 9th. Then running at the top 10, we had the game 2169, so shout out to all of you guys. I finished, I think, in 90th place because I had Kurt Busch and Eric Almirola in my main lineup, and I think we know how that works. So that was a big oof there on my part. I think, yeah, I finished right in 90th place. So that was definitely a rough one for me on my single lineup. But hey, we live and we learn, and we can't control the wrecks. But shout out to the winners, and if you guys want a chance to join the contest, just comment your DK username down below, and I'll be happy to send you that invite. And just fill up rather quickly, because if you're waiting a couple hours before race day, you're getting really iffy on joining that contest. So do it as soon as possible. But I think that's kind of it for the housekeeping for the most part. So without further ado, let's get into the preview of this race. As previously mentioned, this is the Drydene 400. I think that's how you say that company's name. I'm not sure what they do and how to say that name, but I feel like that's probably how it's pronounced. There's your outline of the track. This is Dover International Speedway, aka the Monster Mile is a steep track for the most part, also pretty unique. It's kind of hard to compare it to other tracks, but if I was to compare it to other tracks, I would say Bristol and Darlington are probably the best comparisons, although it's a very unique track, so I hate to put too much into those two tracks, but when we are looking at track type form, those are the other tracks that I did use in comparison with Dover. And it's 1 mile in length, hence the name, the Monster Mile. It's going to be 400 laps, which means Dominator points are going to be pretty darn important this week. We have 280 of them up for grabs, give or take, with the caution. So it's definitely going to be a week that you want Dominators in your lineups, and the guys that are going to more than likely dominate this race are super expensive, and they're starting near the front. So it's going to make for an interesting week, but we definitely want Dominators in our lineup. I would say at least 2, because with 400 laps in the line, unless Truex comes out here and leads 300 of them, and it's only a 1 dom race with a couple minor Dominators, yeah, I guess that would be one scenario where you'd only want 1, but for the most part, I think most of your lineups should have at least 2 Dominators in all of your lineups, especially in tournaments, because in cash games, you might be able to get away with a Truex plus a bunch of place differential guys, but I think for the most part, you want to focus on multi-Dominator lineups with nearly 300 Dominator points on the line on Sunday. But I kind of think that's it for the preview of this race. I should also mention this is using the low downforce aero package, what we usually see at these short tracks. We used this last week at Darlington. But yeah, I think that's kind of it for the preview. We can get into the driver-by-driver breakdown portion of this video. And just my overall thoughts on the pricing this weekend, I think DraftKings did actually a really good job, because the 3 drivers you'd want to play the most would be Truex, Larson, and Hamlin, and they priced those guys accordingly. They've been the best drivers so far this year, pretty much the big 3 for the most part, and these are the 3 guys you would expect to dominate. So hats up to DraftKings. I think they did a good job, because last week Truex was way too low, around $10,000, and you could easily play two of these three guys without much consideration. Now, if you don't play them together, you're probably talking close to $24,000 of your $50,000 you have to spend on DraftKings. So it's definitely going to take a little bit of thinking this week to make lineups, because you can't just simply use Truex and Larson and then print your money at the end of the race and collect your check, because it's going to take a little bit more thinking than that. Yes, some of these place differential plays aren't overly expensive, so that kind of helps some things, and we do have a couple of decent plays down low we can play, but nothing that really stands out too much. So definitely going to take some thinking here, but I think we can still make some things work. And it's always good when DraftKings doesn't make it super easy, because then everyone's going to have the same lineup. So I kind of like how the pricing is a little bit tough this weekend up top. But anyway, we'll start up top with Martin Truex Jr., $11,900, just shy of $12,000. But honestly, I think you'd have to consider Truex here if he was close to $14,000, because he has been the driver you want in this aero package this season. He has shown absolutely zero weakness. He's first in average green flag speed. He's been in contention every single race so far. We have a 4-race sample size. He won at Martinsville. He won at Phoenix. He won last week at Darlington. He was a dominator at Richmond. Didn't win that race, but he was a dominator. And man, it's just hard not to like Truex here. I mean, the only reason you're not playing Truex is you're just banking on bad luck to hit him, which can certainly happen in NASCAR, and his ownership's going to be astronomical. Would be my assumption. He's very expensive, so he's going to have to come out here, dominate, and finish top 5, which I would be shocked if he does not do. But if you are fading Truex this week, you are banking on bad luck, bad pit stops, penalties, and him wrecking, which is not something I'm really willing to bank on. I mean, he's just been flawless this year. He's got the best pit stall, and Dover's a good track for him too, and Dover's a unique track. So the guys that are typically good at Dover, I would imagine, would keep being good at Dover, and the guys that have been good in the short track aero package so far this season, I would assume are going to continue being good at these tracks, because we have no practice. So the cars that have been unloading fast at these tracks, I would assume, are going to be the case. And the Joe Gibbs cars have been phenomenal so far in the short track aero package. Truex has been phenomenal. Denny Hamlin's been phenomenal. Kyle Busch has looked really good so far this year. He even has a win under his belt. And I mean, we know last year Kyle Busch was terrible to his standards, but he's finally starting to pick things up. Christopher Bell was running, looked like he almost could have had a top 5 finish last week until he had a pit with like 5 laps to go, which absolutely killed some of my lineups. Had a few laps inside that had contention for possibly taking down tournaments, and then that pit stop was absolutely brutal for me. But yeah, the Joe Gibbs cars have been absolutely amazing at these track types this year, so I'd imagine that's going to keep being the case. And I like Truex in any format here, cash games, tournaments, whatever you are playing, qualifiers. I have a hard time seeing Truex not coming out here and dominating. He's got the pit stall to do it. He has shown absolutely zero weakness whatsoever in this aero package so far. And Dover's a good track for him. Average finish at 4.3, 5.9 running position. All these numbers are pretty much only behind Kevin Harvick, and Kevin Harvick has been pretty terrible this year, so I can't really expect Kevin Harvick to come out here and dominate. So I would say the guys like Truex, Larson, Hamlin, maybe you can throw in Logano in there as well because he's just been very good in this aero package. Those are probably going to be your main dominators this week. Obviously, some other guys are going to be in contention as well, but there's nothing to not like about Truex. He's got to win 5 top 5s, and if you're looking at his actual finishes, outside of that 2018 fall race, he's finished second, first, and fourth place here. And if you're looking back since the COVID era in this aero package, no one's averaging more DraftKings points per race than Truex at 64.5. He has 4 wins, 9 top 5s, second most laps led, and the most fast laps. So nothing not to like here about Truex. I like him in any format, and I would assume he's going to be my highest owned driver. He'll probably be the highest owned driver on DraftKings, so you're going to have to take a stance here. Do you want to go underweight in the field on Truex and just hope Denny Hamlin comes out and dominates this race and Kyle Larson and Truex has issues? Or you just think he comes out here, leads close to 300 laps and wins the race? Then you better be not all the way in, because I hate to say just to lock a guy in DraftKings and NASCAR because anything can happen. A loose tire can just absolutely screw you. But you'd want to be pretty darn close to it because you're going to want some leverage somewhere. And Truex he's going to be a guy you're going to have to take a stance on this weekend because it's kind of boring just to be even on a guy. So I'd say either go way under and just don't watch the race and pray something happens, or just go all the way in and hope Truex just continues to do what he does to the field and put on a clinic. Then Kyle Larson, $11,500. He is starting in 4th. Assuming the ownership is astronomically high on Truex, I'd have to assume his ownership is going to be not low, but it's going to be lower than Truex. And I think a lot of people will gravitate towards both Truex and Hamlin this weekend because these guys have been the best cars at this aero package so far. Both have shown plenty of dominator upside. I know Denny Hamlin does not have the wins yet, but they're going to start piling up because he's been running very well this year. And we saw a similar scenario where I believe it was Richmond, Truex, and Hamlin both started on the front row, and both were, the 2 main dominators, and they both made the optimal lineup. And it was funny because, people hate playing the pole sitters, and we just had such a rough stretch of guys starting in the front row, and especially the pole sitter. But Truex nipped that in the bud for the most part. I think that's the saying for it. But he put that saying to bed, I guess, whatever you want to call it, because there's really no other driver I'd want in the pole than Martin Truex. Like, he's the one guy I would trust in the pole. And he's already pulled through for us earlier in the year, and so is Denny Hamlin in the front row. So I'm all about both of these guys. So Kyle Larson's probably like more so of your tournament pivot off of those guys, because if you can make Hamlin and Truex work in cash games this week, I realize it's very expensive, but I think that's a very solid way to go. Now, if you are playing both those guys, you're probably going to have to skip some of these guys in the 10K, 9K, probably not the 8K range. You could probably pick a couple of those guys out, then you're going to dip down to the 6K range, so it's going to be kind of top-heavy for the most part. I feel like a lot of lineups are going to be stars and scrubs, but if these guys come out and lead nearly 300 laps combined, you're going to need that in your lineups. I realize it's a very large chunk of your salary just on 2 drivers, but let's say Truex comes out here, leads 200 some laps and finishes top 3, and Hamlin comes out, leads 150 laps. That is certainly possible. They're going to be both in the optimal lineup despite their high price points, so don't be scared of their price tags, because dominator points can make up those expensive price tags in a hurry. But anyway, Kyle Larson, this is a good track for him. His last one before moving to the 5 car was here at Dover in the 42 car for Chip Ganassi Racing. And what I've been saying all year is, wherever Kyle Larson was good in the 42 car, you have to imagine that's going to continue in the 5 car, if not better, which he's obviously been one of the championship contenders this season. I'd say it's kind of between Hamlin, Larson, Truex, and I know William Byron's kind of weird to put in that category, but I believe he's 3rd in owners points right now, and he's been so consistent every single week. He's even has a win. He dominated at Homestead, and I guess you can kind of throw Joey Logano in the mix there as well. But for the most part, the big 3 this year, Truex, Larson, Hamlin. So I'd have to imagine these guys are going to be the ones 1 through 3 for the most part all day, picking up the fast laps and getting the lap sled as well. And looking at the overall numbers for Kyle Larson, he does have a win here, 2 top 5s, nearly 40 laps led per race, and 26 fast laps. Like I mentioned earlier, did win this race in the 2019 fall race, did finish 3rd in the 2019 spring race. And looking at the track type formula, he's a 1-race sample size here because it's only picking up the Darlington race that he ran last week, but he did finish 2nd place. And if you want to use Darlington as a comparable track to Dover, he did run very well there last week. He's also pretty good at Dover. Didn't dominate though, didn't get any laps led, and he has been better in the 550 package than he has in the 750 package. But one thing to keep in mind for Larson is that he's had to go to the rear multiple times at the races that they've ran the short track aero package, so it's kind of hurting his average running position as it's sitting at 11.3 right now in this 4-race sample size. But he has 3 top 5s, 4 top 10s, not getting the laps led, and 17.4 fast laps per race. So he's still fast, and he gave Truex a run for his money at the end of the race last week, which kind of saved the race from being, I'd hate to call the race boring last week, but it was kind of boring. But at the end when Larson was picking up steam to Truex, I thought that was a pretty entertaining race at the end and kind of made it worth it there. But yeah, I like Kyle Larson in tournaments. Not sure I'd play him in cash games over Hamlin, but still obviously one of the best options in the entire slate nonetheless. Then dropping down to Denny Hamlin, $11,100. I like all the Joe Gibbs cars here for the most part. They've been great at the short track aero package so far this season, and this is a pretty good track for Denny Hamlin. He won this race, the first race. It was a doubleheader last year. He won the first race. Kevin Harvick won the second race. They kind of flip-flop, which what they did pretty much all season long last year. It was either Denny Hamlin wins the race or Kevin Harvick won the race, and that was kind of the story of last year. It was kind of boring. This year, there's been a lot of parity for the most part. Yes, Martin Truex Jr. has been picking up some wins, but for the most part, it's been a pretty entertaining season. But yeah, you can sign me up for all the Denny Hamlin I can get my hands on. Both him and Truex are pretty much the top plays on the slate, and I would like to be very, very heavy on both these guys. Denny Hamlin's actually averaging the second most laps led per race here at Dover. Looking at his actual finishes, he finished 19th, which wasn't great in the second race of the doubleheader last year, but first, fifth, and the ugly 21st finish, then second and seventh. Looking at his numbers in this aero package in the COVID era, he is only behind his teammate Martin Truex Jr. in averaging the most DraftKings points per race. Good average running position, has a win, 7 top 5s, the most laps led, and the second most fast laps, only 0.2 behind his teammate MTJ, so definitely big on Hamlin here. Like the big three here quite a bit, but if I had to rank them, I would say it's going to be Truex, Hamlin, Larson for me as of right now. That might change 2 and 3 throughout the weekend, but as of right now, Martin Truex Jr. is definitely number 1 for me. So then dropping down to this 10K range, we have some interesting tournament options here because none of them stand out too much to me, but they are viable and guys we need to keep on our radar this weekend because they're going to have lower ownership due to people being so heavy on guys like Hamlin, Larson, Truex, where these guys are just going to have to be forgotten about a little bit because you can't play 2 of the guys in the 11K range and then just slide in a Kyle Busch for fun here because that's just not going to work out salary-wise. Anyway, we will start with Chase Elliott here, $10,700. He is starting in 8th place, and while these numbers don't look very good, as you can see, a running position of 17.9, average finish of 16.7, he's had several races here recently that have had kind of killed these averages for the most part because I like Chase Elliott at Dover. This is actually a solid track for him. Does have a win here. That was in the 2018 fall race, and he has 3 top 5 finishes, but these finishes recently, where he's finished 39th and 38th in 2 out of the past 3 races in the 30s, it's going to kill some of these numbers down a little bit. So if you're willing to look past those bad finishes where sometimes you just can't really control what happens, this is a pretty solid track for Elliott. He's also been good at Darlington recently, and he's also been very good at Bristol as well, which are kind of the similar tracks for me. I realize that Chase Elliott has not been great so far this year. He's been the worst Hendrick car. I think that's kind of not debatable. He's easily been the worst Hendrick car, which is crazy to say because he won the championship last year and he was so good. But he's definitely behind Bowman, Byron, and Larson right now. I'm not really sure why this is happening, but he has not had that top line speed that he's had last season. It's kind of went to his teammates for the most part. So I think we have to be kind of careful about that because, like I said earlier, the guys that have had speed this season are going to continue having speed, and the guys that don't are probably just not going to get that out of thin air. Now, obviously, things are going to change throughout the season, so we're going to want to be ahead of things before they happen because obviously it's not going to just be Truex winning every single race we have in this aero package, every single race. Like, it's going to obviously change throughout the year. Teams are going to try to find things to change up, and some drivers are going to emerge, and it would not surprise me if Chase Elliott is one of those guys. Now, looking at the 2020, 2021 750 horsepower package numbers, a lot of these good numbers from Chase Elliott are coming from last year because I think he was averaging close to 80 DraftKings points per race. Now it's down to 58.4 when we start adding in these numbers. So take that in consideration because obviously these numbers look fantastic. So far for Chase Elliott, it's been pretty bad, but I do like Dover. This has been a good track for him besides those pretty bad finishes he's had recently, but that's kind of something you're going to have to kind of look past for the most part. So I'm in on Chase Elliott as a tournament play because for $400 more, you can get Denny Hamlin, and I would much rather play him, and most people are going to have the same thought process there. So if you're looking for low ownership, I think Chase Elliott is a decent pivot off of guys like that. Brad Keselowski, $10,300. Kind of similar to Chase Elliott, where Keselowski was one of the best drivers in the field in the 750 package last year. That really hasn't been the case. He's been better in the 550 than he has in the 750, and Dover, finish-wise, hasn't exactly been the best track for Brad Keselowski. He's got a great running position of 6.8, which is only behind Harvick and Truex, but if you're looking at his actual finishes, he has no wins, 0 top 5s, 3 top 10s, which is fine. And starting 15th, there is some decent place differential upside with always dominator points available to us, but definitely hasn't been elite numbers for Keselowski, I should say. Like, he's been a lap leader here before, he's gotten fast laps, but in terms of like finishes, Like, they're okay, 8th, 9th, 11th, 12th, 14th, 6th, those are solid, but we want some wins in there. We want some, absolute dominations, which we haven't really seen too much of from Keselowski, especially this season. That's Aero package. So I do have some concerns there. Starting 15th, that's a fine price point. If you want to pair him with a guy like Truex, just to lock in like the early dominator points, and then just Keselowski as a more of a place differential with dominator upside, you could certainly go that route. Not saying it's my favorite way to go, but if you want to try to balance out your lineup in terms of starting position, that could be a decent way to go, because Keselowski's due for a top 5 here. It's just I do have concerns with the way he's running this Aero package so far this season. Then Kyle Busch here at $10,000. He's starting 6th. I think he's a fine play. He seems back for the most part. Maybe not like back, but he feels back, if that makes any sense, because he has had some solid runs this year. He even spun out last week and he ended up working his way back up. So I think Kyle Busch, even though it's not still there's no practice these days, and I said we can't really play Kyle Busch much without practice, times are starting to change a bit, and he's definitely been gradually looking better so far this season. So I like Kyle Busch at that price point. Starting 6th, he does have some dominator upside, which sounds crazy to say because we haven't really been able to say that about Kyle Busch much since last season, but he's definitely in the right direction now, and Joe Gibbs' cars have been phenomenal at the short track so far this year. So I definitely like Kyle Busch. I think he's a solid play at only $10,000. And if you're going to pair him up with a guy like Truex, if you can't get quite up to Denny Hamlin, I don't think that's a terrible way to go. And then dropping down to this 9K range, we have Kevin Harvick, $9,800. He is starting in 5th. If you were just simply looking at track history, you're probably all about Kevin Harvick here because he got an average finish of 3.3, averaging 108.5 DraftKings points per race with a 4.3 running position, the best driver rating, 2 wins, 5 top 5s, over 100 laps led per race. He won this race, most recent race here last year. He's finished 4th, 6th, and 1st with another first place finish coming from last season. And if you're looking at the track type form, he's very good at Darlington. He's very good at Dover. Bristol, I wouldn't say is his best track, but he has had some decent races there recently, and averaging averaging nearly 90 DraftKings points per race at these track types with 4 wins. So yeah, if you're looking at these numbers and charts, yes, it's going to say that Kevin Harvick is a guy that you should certainly play, and while the numbers would suggest that, it's hard to trust Kevin Harvick these days because the Stewart-Haas cars have just been absolutely brutal, and Kevin Harvick just does not have the kind of speed that he had last season. Even last week, he got up front at Darlington very early on, but I think he only led around 10 laps, and I don't even think he broke 10 fast laps and ended up getting passed early on. So, and if he couldn't do it at Darlington, I mean, I don't see why he can do it here at Dover because he's got an amazing track history at Darlington. It feels like a very similar play to last week at Darlington, and while he might have some decent speed at some point, it's hard to see him dominate over guys like Truex, Larson, and Hamlin this week, even over guys like Kyle Busch, which would sound insane dating back to last season. So while the numbers are good for Kevin Harvick, very hard to trust. I will play a little bit because at some point it's going to happen. I said that last year with Kyle Busch almost every single week, and at one point it did happen where Kyle Busch did dominate and win a race, and that's going to happen for Kevin Harvick. At some point, he hasn't even really been awful this year. Like, he's still getting good finishes, but he's not doing what we'd expect from him. Especially if you're brand new to NASCAR DFS, like from when COVID started, when NASCAR was the only sport, I think it's probably really shocking to you this year to not have Kevin Harvick dominate, because when you guys came in, it was just Kevin Harvick every single week, and he just kept dominating. So it's probably a bit of a shock to you this year what's happening, but that's the kind of things that can happen in NASCAR, especially with no practice where teams can't really dial in that car. So Kevin Harvick probably want to be maybe a little bit underweight because I feel like the field's going to play him just because of how good he is at Dover, but that just really has not been a profitable strategy this year, playing Kevin Harvick much. It's going to happen at some point, so you want some exposure to it, but you just really have no idea when that's going to happen until they nail that setup. Joey Logano, $9,500. He is starting in 9th, and he's one guy I really like this weekend. If he's going to go overlooked, I like being way overweight on Joey Logano because he has been one of the best drivers in this Aero package, even dating back to last season. Even this year, he's been very good. And last week at Darlington, while he didn't have the great finish that he deserved, he had a top 3 car last week. Like, he was really, really good. I believe he's 3rd in average green flag speed, only behind Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. this year at the short track Aero package, 750 horsepower. So I don't see why Joey Logano's not going to continue that. I feel like he's a little bit too cheap. I feel like there's no reason he should be cheaper than Kevin Harvick, to be honest. I think Logano should probably be right around where Chase Elliott is. So starting 9th, $9,500. If you can't play the double spend-ups with Hamlin and Truex, if you can go Truex, Logano, Hamlin, Logano, and save some cash with him, I think that's definitely a really solid way to go because Joey should definitely be a contender in this race. And like I was mentioning earlier, Dover's kind of like a big Bristol. Joey Logano is one of the best drivers in the entire field at Bristol. Darlington, maybe not one of his best tracks, but he was fine there last week in this Aero package, which is something new that they've done. So yeah, I'm definitely in on Logano here. Outside of that 34th place finish in 2019, 6th, 8th, 7th, 3rd, and 13th, and it would not surprise me if he's got a top 5 run here, and he can honestly contend for the win as well. I don't think that's likely over a guy like Hamlin or Truex, but it's definitely in the cards here, and if you're looking at this aero package, he's got the best drive rating, the second most top 5s, tied for the most top 10s with Chase Elliott, some of the most laps led, some of the best fast laps, the best running position, I think 3rd in DraftKings points scored per race, only behind Denny Hamlin and Truex. So you can sign me up for all of the Joey Logano I can get in tournaments this week. Not sure I'd play him in cash games because I might just want to go the safe route with Truex and Hamlin, but I do like Joey Logano quite a bit this week, even though he only has one top 5 here recently. Then Alex Bowman, $9,200. He is starting in 16th. I think he's a solid play. Not that it means a lot here, but Jimmy Johnson, this 48 car was absolutely phenomenal at Dover. I know it's not the same thing anymore, so I'm just saying I think Alex Bowman can continue that tradition of keeping this 48 car running very well here at Dover. And he just have 3 top 5 finishes here recently, so it's not like would be a new thing if Alex Bowman was having a good run here on Sunday. But outside of that 21st place finish in the first race last year, the doubleheader, he has finishes of 5th, 3rd, and 2nd recently. Obviously, 2019 did not go well for Bowman, but he's been really improving since last season, and this year he's definitely been very, very good. That 48 car is showing some speed every single week. I know he's one of those drivers that can be running well, then bad things happen to him, so that's something you have to keep in mind when you do roster Alex Bowman. But starting 16th, only $9,200, you get a nice place differential play with top 5 upside, so I think Bowman is a relatively safe play for the most part, and a nice price point as well. Starting 7 spots further back than Joey Logano. I just feel like Joey Logano has a little bit more dominator upside than Alex Bowman does here. Then once we get down to this 8K range, we start to get outside of where the dominators are, the potential dominators, although William Byron, Ryan Blaney, I would say are outside shots of being dominators, but probably not the most likely candidates for us, but there is potential there. But we start getting to these place differential drivers. But first, we do have Billy B here, $8,900. He's starting in 3rd, and he's been one of the most consistent drivers in NASCAR this year. I have nothing bad to say about Byron besides the starting spot, because I just can't see him dominating over guys like Truex, Hamlin, and Larson up front, and I would imagine Larson's probably going to round him early on. So I think Byron can have a strong run. He's probably going to be a top 8 guy for the most part of the day. Wouldn't even surprise me if he's a top 5 guy for the most part. But nearly $9,000, I need some dominator points out of him. If he can pick up a chunk of fast laps and just finish in the top 5, it could work out if something happens to Kurt Busch or Eric Almirola in the similar price range where they don't get their place differential points. If they happen to wreck out like they did last week, which is possible, Byron could be a really nice sneaky play. I'd imagine the ownership's going to be pretty low. I'd much rather play Bowman for only $300 more and Logano for not much more as well. But I think Byron's worth having a little bit of ownership too, just in case he happens to get up front, leads laps, and happens to pick up fast laps and gets a top 5 finish, which is certainly possible because of how good Byron has been this season. Kurt Busch, $8,700. He's starting in 28th. He wrecked out last week. What are you going to do? Just chalk it up to bad luck? I think we can go right back to the Kurt Busch wall here. Seems a bit cheap in my opinion for a guy starting in 28th place, and especially for a guy that's got top 10 upside here anytime we go to Dover. Looking at his recent finishes here, if you just take out the 40th place finish where he wrecked out early on in the first race of the doubleheader last year, I was actually rewatching that race this morning and saw the Kurt Busch wreck, and I was like, yeah, I probably had a decent amount of Kurt Busch that race. I forget exactly where he started, but definitely feel like it did not go that well for me. But he's finished 13th, 9th, 13th, 5th, and 5th. If he can just pick up some of his average finishes here, that's a pretty darn good day at $8,700, starting in nearly 30th place. So you can sign me up for some Kurt Busch this week for some place differential. Ryan Blaney, $8,400. He's starting in 7th place. This is a real cheap price point for Ryan Blaney, and you guys know me. I'll play Ryan Blaney any chance I get. So I think I'm going to hop on some Ryan Blaney this week just because of the price point. I know it hasn't been a stretch of where I want to play Ryan Blaney a lot because we went through some pretty bad tracks for him in Richmond and Darlington. Pretty much his 2 worst tracks, and I wouldn't say Dover's that great for him either. He has no top 5s here, only 1 top 10 finish, so it's kind of been a rough stretch of tracks for Ryan Blaney, but he actually has been running well at those tracks. Like, he's actually putting up some decent numbers. He was actually in the optimal lineup last week as well. I don't even think anyone played that optimal lineup. I want to say it was like Blaney, Truex, I can't remember if Larson made it or not, but then Buescher was in there, Ryan Newman, and Chase Briscoe made it, which is probably why no one played that lineup. But yeah, Ryan Blaney made it last week. He's got a good running position here at 10th place, but the average finish is nearly 6 spots lower. He's got a drive rating above 91 here, and it's kind of a big Bristol, and Ryan Blaney's one of the better drivers I like to roster at Bristol. He's got finishes of 12th, 14th, 35th, 15th, 11th, and 8th here, which isn't incredible, but the way he's been running this year, only $8,400 for a guy that's got top 5 upside and can certainly pick up some fast laps, and I guess I wouldn't be overly surprised if he got up front. Yeah, you can sign me up for some Ryan Blaney. I think he's a pretty solid play at that price this weekend. Eric Almirola, $8,200, starting in 32nd. What are you going to do? You got wrecked last week by Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Really can't blame that on Eric Almirola. I know he isn't having the greatest season by any means possible this year, but in this aero package, especially dating back to last season, Eric Almirola has been picking up some really solid finishes. If we go like straight on over to the 750 horsepower package numbers, he's averaging 14.5 running position with an average finish inside the top 15. Has 1 top 5, 7 top 10s, 9 top 15s, and 11 top 20s. Obviously, wouldn't expect him to get much dominator points here whatsoever, but he could easily get a top 15 here. He's got 2 top 10 finishes in this aero package so far this season. And I go, last week, you're going to have a bad taste in your mouth. He was one of my highest owned drivers. It sucked. He was in my qualifier lineups, which suck when you know you're dead 7 laps in. I think it's when you're wrecked, which it sucks. But I'm going to go back to the well here, hoping his ownership's a little bit lower because of that last week. But there's absolutely nothing you can do about wrecks. So starting in 32nd, only $8,200. I am playing him in cash games once again. His price tag isn't terrible, and he should be a top 15 contender. We're looking at his just overall Dover numbers. He's got 6 top 20 finishes here the past 6 races. So if nothing goes wrong here, I would imagine Eric Almirola is probably going to contend for a top 15, average finish of 13.5 with a running position inside the top 13. So I like Almirola quite a bit, and I'd imagine, unfortunately, he'll be one of my higher owned drivers. Christopher Bell, $8,000. He's starting in the 11th. Eric Jones was able to put up some halfway decent numbers here at Dover, so I feel like Christopher Bell can probably improve upon those numbers. Would not be surprised if Bell can get a top 10 finish here. The Joe Gibbs cars have been very good at these shorter tracks so far this season. That should carry over to Bell. He's really cheap at only $8,000. I realize the starting spot of 11th doesn't look that great, and maybe they're just basing that off of his numbers here last year, but it's kind of stupid to do because he was in the 95 car, and obviously the 20 car is one of the better cars in the entire field. So Christopher Bell, do like him in tournaments, wouldn't go there in cash games, but that price point is very appealing to me for a driver with top 10 upside every single race, even top 5 upside, really, for the most part. And dropping out of the 7K range, it's not great, but it's not terrible either. I do think there's some viable plays here, especially Cole Custer, but MDB starting 18th, I just feel like he's going to probably finish around 18th place for the most part. Looking at his finishes at Dover, I don't think it's fair to use anything before 2020 because he's in a different car, although he did finish 7th here in the 2019 fall race. But last year he finished 17th and 20th place. If we're looking at his track type form at these tracks, average running position of 16.5, 6 top 20s. I mean, for the most part, he's probably going to be a 15th to 20th place car here. If you're looking at this aero package, he's actually been pretty strong in this aero package, to be honest. 14.4 average finish, 14.1 average running position, 5 top 10s, 8 top 15s, and 13 top 20s, which is actually tied for the most with Joey Logano and Kevin Harvick, which is a stat I just found here while doing this video with you guys. So that was actually pretty interesting to me. But for the most part, Matt DiBenedetto here, I think he could be a 15th place guy, which is not terrible starting 18th. I'll have some ownership to him, but definitely not one of my favorite plays on Sunday. Cole Custer, $7,700. He's starting back on 30th. I feel like a lot of people are going to start their lineups like Truex, Hamlin, and they're going to throw in Almirola and Cole Custer. I feel like you can do that. I'm not sure how much money that leaves you left over, but I feel like that's definitely a viable way to go. And last year at Dover, it was actually a really good track for Cole Custer. An average finish of 10.5 with a running position of 12. Looking at the exact finishes for him, he finished 10th and 11th if you guys couldn't do the 2-race sample size math on an average finish of 10.5. But yeah, I don't hate Cole Custer here. I know he's been pretty bad this year, but in this aero package, since last season, he has 3 top 10s, 6 top 15s, and 7 top 20s. So starting back in 30th, I think he's a fine play. I know he had issues last week, but again, that's not something you can really account for each and every single week. Tyler Reddick and Austin Dillon, the 2 RCR cars, both starting close to each other at similar price points. I feel like they're pretty similar plays for the most part. Tyler Reddick's always a little bit more fun to play because I feel like there's always like a pretty high ceiling with him, but Austin Dillon feels like the better play between these 2 guys for me this weekend. And he actually got up front at one point. I know that was kind of weird on pit strategies because guys stayed out early on at the competition caution in the first Dover race, and some guys obviously pit. But Austin Dillon, he was able to stay out front for a little bit, led a decent chunk of laps, had finishes of 9th and 15th place last year. Also had a 7th place finish in the 2018 fall race at Dover with 2 top 10s, 5 top 20s. I think Austin Dillon's a decent play. Tyler Reddick, you can play him because he always has sneaky top 10 potential. Did finish 13th here in the first race, but both guys are not the safest plays in the world because of where they're starting, but they do carry some GPP upside, so I will have some exposure to them. Eric Jones, $7,200. He's starting in 23rd. It's always hard to get a feeling on what to do with Eric Jones because he's now in the 43 car, which is obviously not that great. In the 20 car, yeah, he had top 5 upside in that car. He actually had a top 5 finish here at Dover recently the past few years. Now in the 43 car, we're usually hoping for top 15s, which is certainly possible. And with Dover being more of a skills track, I think Eric Jones, I think he's a talented driver. He's just in bad equipment now. I think he could ride his way to a top 15 and only $7,200. I think he's a viable play, not one of my favorite plays because in the 43 car, but the price isn't terrible. It's not like he's close to 8K like he has been. So at $7,200, I think Eric Jones is playable. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. at $7,100, he's starting in 20th. Does have 2 top 10 finishes here. Now, some of these numbers are skewed by that 37th place and 33rd finish he had in the 2018 spring race and the 2020, I guess it was the second race, the doubleheader, if that's what you want to call it. So those numbers are being skewed a little bit, but outside of those races, finishes of 10th, 16th, 9th, and 15th. And one thing also to mention that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. specifically is actually pretty good at steep tracks. It's kind of his best track type, if that's what you want to call it. So I think $7,100 starting in 20th place. Stenhouse Jr., a guy that's been running pretty well this year outside of the past recent races. I think Stenhouse is a solid play, $7,100 starting in 20th because we are at a steep track. So I do like Stenhouse. Going down to the 6 range, we have Bubba Wallace, $6,900. He is starting in 22nd. He has been terrible this year. You would think that in the 23 car, pretty much an extension of Joe Gibbs Racing, of how good Joe Gibbs has been this year, you'd think Bubba Wallace would kind of not be right up there with them, but at least maybe not even somewhat close, but in the vicinity of them, and he has been absolutely horrendous this year. I don't know why that would change. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because he's on a new team now, and they really haven't had much time in the shop now with COVID stuff, but you could say the same thing with Daniel Suarez, and he's been doing fine this year, so I'm having a hard time trusting Bubba. The price is getting low, $6,900. If you want to take a couple stabs at him, you can, but I have a hard time recommending Bubba Wallace to any of you guys. Ryan Newman, Chris Buescher, 2 teammates here. They've actually been running pretty solid this year. Both Roush Fenway cars have been, I would say, outrunning their equipment, and they're starting 10th and 13th for a reason because they've been picking up good finishes. But the thing is, I've been playing Chris Buescher a lot this year, and I was looking at my 2021 optimal lineups, and Buescher's been in the optimal lineup quite a bit this year. He just seems to be cheap, and he seems to be running well. And I know people don't like playing him much. Like, I know he's been high owned quite a few weeks, but it doesn't feel good because of where he's starting. But he keeps kind of running around where he's starting and finishing there for the most part. And even though he's starting 10th this week, if he finishes like 12th or 13th, that's not terrible at his price tag. So I could get behind playing a little bit of Buescher, maybe a little bit of Newman as well. Both guys have 3 top 20s here. While it's not their best tracks in the road, the way they've been running this season, I think they could both hang around the top 15, so I don't hate Buescher or Newman. I mean, they're not going to grade out well because of where they're starting, but I think they're still viable. Ross Chastain, $6,500. He's starting in 19th. Don't look at the numbers here because he was an absolute junk equipment, but looking at his numbers this season in this aero package, he has an average finish of 17.8, running position inside the top 20, and he also has 4 top 20 finishes. So I actually like Ross Chastain quite a bit. I think he's one of my favorite cheaper drivers this week because the other ones aren't that great. I like Suarez a lot, but McDowell starting 21st. It's okay. It's not great, but it's okay. Briscoe's starting a little far up. Priest, Joy, Alfredo. Yeah, you're going to have to play some of those guys just because of the price points, but it's nothing pretty. So I like Chastain. He has top 15 upside. It looked like he had top 10 upside last week until he had that stupid decision of staying out. I don't know what that was. I know they're hoping for a caution, but I mean, I think we're all at home. I know it's easy to, Monday morning quarterback, but I mean, this is a dumb decision in my opinion. In my opinion. I'm sure a lot of people have the same opinion, but I didn't get it. I know you're hoping for a caution, but even then, do you guys really think Ross Chastain's going to keep the lead after they pit and stuff? No, he's going to get past. I mean, it's not like he was going to hold the lead and just win the race because he stayed out. Like, it was a dumb decision. Like, just take your top 10 potential finish was what I would say, but I guess it doesn't really matter. He still had a fine race nonetheless. Then Daniel Suarez starting 24, $6,300. I'd say he's one of my favorite plays down low. I would play him in cash games if I can. He was actually decent at Dover when he was in good equipment. 4 top 15s, 2 top 10s, and even a top 5 finish. 99 car, while it's not a Joe Gibbs car or a Stuart Haas car, it's still okay. I mean, it's pretty much a third RCR car for the most part, and I'd say they both have top 10 potential, so I wouldn't be surprised if Suarez could compete for a top 15 in this race. I think it's actually a very good play this weekend. Michael McDowell, $6,200, starting 21st. He's been good in this aero package since last season. Not a really good track for him. Doesn't have any top 20s, but if you're just looking to differentiate yourself from Chastain and Suarez, I wouldn't hate playing a little bit of McDowell, but I'm not expecting much out of him. Chase Briscoe, $6,100, starting 17th. Having a hard time doing that. He's good at steep tracks. I will say that. He's good at steep tracks. He could hang in the top 20, which isn't terrible at his price point, but starting 17th, I'd have to imagine he's going to lose a few spots. but that might not kill you at its price point. And after those guys, it gets pretty ugly pretty quick. The only viable plays down here are Priest, LaJoy, and Alfredo. I might want to just limit that to Priest and LaJoy because I just can't trust the pasta man. Like I hate playing the pasta guy. So I would say Priest and LaJoy are the guys you can play here. I just wish they were starting a little bit further back, but starting 25th and 26th, they could hang around where they start, but that's probably the only upside that they have. But if you guys are rostering guys like Hamlin, Truex, you're gonna have to play some of these guys down low. So Priest and LaJoy are viable. Alfredo would be the third option there, but even then I hate going that route. But he's starting the furthest back. Justin Haley is not racing this weekend. I did not get the chance to update that yet. It's going to be Barry. I actually just got the email while I was recording this video that he's going to be in the player pool. He's going to be $5,300, so the same price as Haley and the 77 car, so that's something to keep in mind. But even then, I'm not really sure I want to play that, but I guess he would be okay. $5,300 if you just want the salary relief. I think he's fine starting close to 30th place. Then after that, don't really want to play Davison, Smithley, Balicki, McLeod, Half, where just don't see them making the optimal lineup outside of like a big, massive wreck happening, which I guess it happened at Martinsville, so it can happen anywhere, but I don't really see that happening. So I would say Haley or I guess Barry and above are all viable, but outside of that, I wouldn't play any of these scrubs for the most part. With that being said, guys, I think that's going to be it for the video. So if you made it all the way through, please let me know. I do appreciate everyone that has watched the entire video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave your comments down below. If you want to follow me over on social media, ChrisPennell16 on Twitter and CPen16 over on IG. And if you want to help support the channel over on Patreon, I put a lot of work into this each and every single week. You can join the community of several hundred members. Link is down below for that, for the projections, optimizer, ownership projections, rankings, cheat sheets, data sheets, Discord chat, everything you see in my spreadsheet. There's like a million tabs here. I'm rotating them, or I guess gliding them to the left here. The list just goes on and on. So it's all available to you guys. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And I appreciate everyone watching, and I'll see you guys in the live stream on Sunday at around 12 p.m. Eastern.